All right.
Okay, so let me share my screen. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just want to welcome everybody to the second of our programs for Region 2. This morning we have Robert Bloom. He's going to be talking about Prop 19. If you have questions, if you could put them in the chat or raise your virtual hand, we'll be happy to try to get to those. I have Donna Medina and Susie Bracken on here to help me see those questions. And so with no further ado, let me turn it over to Robert Bloom. He's an attorney with C.A.R, been around for a while, and he is our expert on Prop 19. Thank you, Robert.
All right, thank you. Okay, I am an expert, but you're gonna have to put that word expert in quotes. And that's where this disclaimer comes in. It was a perfect lead-in. So I'm not actually a tax expert. The information in this presentation, and this is all on the side of the thing here, is general information. It's not intended as a substitute for individual legal advice, and there's specific examples, but really those can't be applied specifically. They're just general, and any person you're talking to, they have to be advised to speak with their own tax attorney or estate planning expert. So with that being said, the name of the presentation is Prop 19, Homeowner Tax Savings Everywhere in the States. Is a very positive title there, because it's pretty good actually. So let me, so you see, so you can see my screen here, right? It should say Prop 19 overview. Right, okay.
Oh yes, I see it. I muted myself too.
Okay, so Prop 19 is actually pretty straightforward. It takes the existing system. The existing system allows tax portability within all counties or even between certain counties. It takes this existing system and it simply extends it. So under Prop 19, you're a homeowner 55 or over, a severely disabled person, or a person whose home was destroyed by fire. That person, they can transfer the taxable value of their primary residence to a replacement primary residence. It has to be primary to primary. And they can do this anywhere in the state, regardless of the location, or regardless of the value of the replacement primary residence, even if that replacement primary residence is of greater value. But if that's the case, then there will have to be a kind of blended adjustment upward in the tax basis. So regardless of value, quote unquote, but if it's higher, there's a blended upward adjustment. And you can do this within 2 years of the sale of the original residence. And that's 2 years either before the sale or 2 years after the sale, either way. So the sale can happen before the purchase. It's also possible it can happen after. And you can do this up to 3 times. Before it was just 1 time. And if the house was destroyed by fire, you can do it more. Now this applies on or after April 1st of this year. And I'm going to discuss a little later just exactly what that means. So this slide is telling you the key differences. The key differences between, it says current law. It actually, now that I'm reading this, I should write that old law. It's really the old law. So the key differences to what the previous law was and Prop 19. So first off, Prop 19 allows property tax portability anywhere in the state, and previously under 60 and 90 was limited to within the same county or between certain counties. In fact, there were only 10 counties which allowed for inter-county transfers, although you mentioned that recently, your county recently changed over, so maybe it was the 11. And anyway, that you don't have to worry about that now. It's anywhere. You can do it anywhere. You don't have to worry about the inter-county approval. And then secondly, Prop 19 allowed for the transfer of the tax basis, even if it was of greater value. It doesn't have to be equal or lesser. That equal or lesser was a huge problem before. It created all sorts of frustrations within the transaction. And if you went over the equal or lesser value, the taxpayer, the client purchasing the new property would get nothing. So they would get no tax benefit at all if you went over it. So now you can go over it, but then there's just a blended upward adjustment. And I think that's a really big point, because previously, you had to really look for a property which was within the cap. But now the advice to the client is, find a property that you want to purchase. And so it's much better. And lastly, under Prop 19, you can do it up to 3 times. It's not just a one-time thing. Now, one of the questions we do get is, I've already transferred my property under Prop 60. Does that count as one of the 3 times under Prop 19? The answer is it's a speculative answer, like a lot of the answers I'm going to give. But the answer is no. It's very unlikely that we'll cut into the 3 times. Now I have this this chart here. It's the same information. It's just in chart form, so it's just a reference. That's all I have it here for. Okay, so the timing. So Prop 19 came into full effect on April 1st. And this means for properties that close on or after April 1st, with the closing of both the purchase and sale occur on or after April 1st, these transactions will clearly qualify for Prop 19 tax savings. So assuming all of the other criteria are met, if the transaction, both purchase and sale, occur after April 1st, you're good. It's you don't even have to think about it. However, we're still in a bit of a transition period where a homeowner, and we will be actually for 2 years, but now we're really in it. So we're a homeowner who closed on the sale or purchase prior to April 1st, and that homeowner is now buying or selling into another property. And the question arises, does this homeowner whose purchase and sale of property straddles the April 1st date, does this homeowner get the Prop 19 tax savings? And the answer is maybe. That's the second bullet point I have up there. Right now, we're in the middle of negotiating implementing legislation, and this implementing legislation could allow the homeowner to obtain Prop 19 tax savings. I mean, to tell you the truth, it's actually very, very likely. I said maybe and could, but that's just being conservative. Really, it's in my estimation, it's almost a done deal. I've looked at the legislation that is being negotiated, and I don't think the Board of Equalization is pushing back against what we would prefer. Of course, we would want it to straddle the April 1st deadline. So I think it's a pretty strong possibility, frankly. Okay. But if you're talking to a client, it's a maybe. Okay. And finally, if the sale and purchase both close before April 1st, then this is very unlikely to be eligible for the Prop 19 tax savings. It's not impossible, but the way the implementing legislation is shaping up, it's probably not going to happen. Now, if I have spoken with people on the phone, they're saying, but I've read the legislation and it seems to allow me to do this, blah, 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 blah. I say, you can always make the claim with the assessor, take it to the highest level of the assessor, and then sue. Somebody's going to do this, and it's not like there's no legal basis for this claim at all. It's possible, but it's not going to be an easy road. Anyway, the point is that if everything's closing on or after April 1st, you're pretty good. Even if it's straddling, that's very likely to come in, but not if both closing and purchase occur before April 1st. Okay. So let's see. Okay. Okay, so let's see here. Now, one of the issues that comes up is this phrase equal or lesser. And we use this in Prop 19 because if you're buying a property that's of equal or lesser value, then you simply transfer the tax basis. But if you're buying a property of more than that, of greater value, then you have to do this blended adjustment. So this phrase equal or lesser value is pretty important. And then the question is, well, what does that mean? And equal or lesser value had a very particular meaning previously under Prop 60. Previously, equal or lesser value of the replacement property meant 105% of the replacement property if purchased within 1 year of sale of the original, and 110% if purchased within the 2nd year after sale of the original property. If either of these things happen, then under the old law, the tax basis of the original principal residence could simply transfer. And that's been the law for 30 years. And so when I first gave this presentation and when I read equal or lesser value in Prop 19, I figured, well, that would simply be the new definition. But then I saw the Board of Equalization's implementing legislation and their proposed regulations and their forms, and they have a completely different take. They want to ignore this definition that we've been relying on for 30 years, and they just want to go with just what we would call the plain meaning, meaning the actual value of the property. So we're pushing back against that, and right now we just don't know what the ultimate legislation is going to end up being. So that's why I have this, I guess is the second to last bullet point, answer unclear. The equal or lesser could mean the definition that we've been using for 30 years, but maybe it won't. So we just don't know what the outcome of that's going to be. Now, here's like the key, I guess this is a key slide. Well, they're all pretty key, but this one is, I think, the one that people really want to know about. So how do you determine the new tax basis when you transfer your principal residence? And there's 2 rules. So the first rule is very simple, easy. And that is you simply transfer the tax basis when the property's of equal or lesser value. That's it, done. So the second rule is also pretty basic, but it's a little bit more complicated. It's for when the replacement property is of, quote, greater value. And as I said, we don't know exactly what that means at this point. So when the property is of greater value, the rule is you transfer the tax basis, but you add to that the difference between the purchase price of the replacement property and the original property. So tax basis plus the difference between original and replacement property. And I have this example. So suppose you have an original primary residence with a tax basis of $400,000, and suppose it sells for $900,000. But the replacement primary residence is $1 million. So the replacement primary residence is of greater value. Well, remember, under the old rule, you'd be out of luck. That would be it, game over. Okay. But under Prop 19, you get to transfer the tax basis, but you make the adjustment. It's an increase, and the new tax basis will be the $400,000 tax basis plus the difference of $100,000 between the old and new properties. And you add that together, you get $500,000. $500,000 is the new tax basis. So big advantage. Before you couldn't do it. Now the advice is go and find something you like. And I've explained who can qualify for Prop 19, but there's one last final step to actually get the benefit. You have to file a claim with the county assessor within 3 years of the purchase of the replacement property. So all of this information here, the bullet points on this slide, I got this by looking at the county assessor's claim form. It's the same, doesn't matter what county you're, because the BOE, they create the forms, and essentially all the counties just adopt them. So I got this by looking at the county assessor claim form, and I turned it over. This is all the information on the back. It's right there. So you have to file the claim within 3 years. Even if you file the claim after the 3 years, you can still get a benefit, but you will lose the 3 years of tax benefit. And the last bullet point is clients can be reminded to contact the county assessor to obtain the appropriate form. And if a client has a question as to which is the correct form, because there's quite a number of them, they should be directed to speak with their legal or tax advisor. Okay, so I think that's
Robert?
Yes.
We did have a question.
Okay.
Tina, did you want to ask your question now? Let's see if I can get to. What she was talking about is for heirs. She wanted to talk about, you know, how the one part of Prop 19 is the.
Right.
Yeah. So what's involved around that?
Okay. Well, you know what? That's the next. That's the next part of the thing. Let me do this. I do have one more slide here. On the portability. I call this the portability section. Okay. And so these are questions that come up. You know, I mean, maybe we'll talk about this. It will give people a chance to come up with their own questions. You know, sort of. You have to think about these things a little. So one question that is asked is the first one. What if the replacement property has a taxable basis less than the original? They're probably not talking about California in this case, but what if the replacement property has a tax basis less than the original? Is the homeowner required to transfer the taxable basis? In other words, like I'm buying into a property which is has less tax basis than my original. Why do I want to transfer the tax basis there? And the answer is you don't have to. You never have to transfer your tax basis. It's an option. So that one's easy. Okay. This one comes up, the second one comes up quite a bit. If a homeowner shares title with another person on the replacement principal residence, can they still get the exemption? And the answer is yes. What matters is if 100% of the replacement primary residence changed ownership. And again, I have subject to implementing legislation. So in most cases, adding someone to title, having another person on title isn't going to impair the portability. When I say subject to implementing legislation, this is a rule that was basically the same rule from previous. And in fact, most of the rules are the same rules. The Board of Equalization, they're not in a big hurry to completely alter the whole system of rules that they've had and have grown used to. They basically want to keep them all. So most of the time, the rule will be the same, but there's a few key points which are different, but this is the same. And the next one is the same too. So, and this is an interesting question. Does the homeowner have to sell their original property? Can they transfer it to their son? So two questions. So the first question, does the homeowner have to sell their original property? Generally, yes. The property must be sold, right? Because that's part of Prop 19. You can transfer the tax basis within 2 years after the sale of the original property. But no, you can't transfer it to the son. Transferring the son is not going to work because the son is not going to be entitled. The son will be, because the son will be entitled to an exemption. So basically, the son getting the exemption means that you can't transfer it. So typically the original property must undergo a change of ownership that subjects the property to reappraisal at full cash value. And that again is the old rule, and there's no reason that it won't be the same rule going forward. But the first question is, do I have to sell the property? I mean, you get that when obviously somebody wants to buy a new property, but they want to hold on to their existing property as, say, an investment property. And the answer is, well, you're not really going to be able to do that. Okay, so we're going to look at the intergenerational questions, and and this was another part of Prop 19. So Prop 19, the part that realtors and brokers and agents are concerned with generally is the portability, but there was another section having to do with the intergenerational transfer of between parents to children or parents to grandchildren. So previously, what was the old rule? So previously, all transfers of principal residence to your children were exempt, regardless of how the children used the property. They could rent it out, they could live in it, it did not matter. And this principal residence exemption was unlimited. 5 million, 10 million, it made no difference what the value of that principal residence was. I mean, that's part of what the news articles were all about, the $15 million beachfront property owned by the heirs of some famous actor, you know? So unlimited principal residence exemption, and the parents simply got to transfer the property. And in addition to this unlimited exemption for transfer of principal residence, the law allowed an exemption for all other real property up to $1 million. So those were the two exemptions. So one was for the principal residence and the other was for all other real property up to $1 million. And then on February 16th, the rules changed. So under Prop 19, the parent-to-child exemption, you only get this parent-to-child exemption if the property continues as the family home. The child has to continue to live in the property as their principal residence. So before you inherited the property you got from your dad, it didn't matter what you did with it. As long as it was your dad's principal residence, you're good. But under the new rule, it has to be your principal residence too. You have to live in it as your principal residence. And on top of that, there's also a new family farm exemption. So as long as the property being transferred from parent to child is being used for a quote unquote agricultural purpose, then that could be transferred to the child and the tax basis would be retained just like the principal residence. Now, I say here transferred. Transferred is, you know, it could be anything really. It actually could be a sale, it could be a gift, it could also be inheritance. All of that is a transfer. One of the questions that comes up is, well, what if I presently own a property under that I received from my parents and I'm renting it out and I have this low tax basis? Am I grandfathered in? That's some sort of pun, I guess. I'm grandfather. I don't know. Yes, you are grandfathered in. This law is not going to be applied retroactively to eliminate a tax benefit that you currently hold. But the February 16th deadline was a very big deadline. And I don't know, maybe you've heard about this, but there was even a proposal that was being floated in the legislature to change the deadline through legislation, move it up 2 years, you know? And I thought, well, actually, I told our Sacramento office, that's unconstitutional. You need a referendum to do that. You can't just legislate this Prop 19 date out of the way. Anyway, the February 16th is the big date.
Robert, there is a question. Does family farm mean it has to be in an ag preserve?
No, it does not have to be an ag preserve. It has to be used for an agricultural purpose. And what exactly that means is not 100% clear. I mean, I own 100 acres of property. I have one cow. It's in or one bull. It's in a pen somewhere. Is that an agricultural purpose? I don't know. It's not clear how deeply involved you have to be in the agricultural business before it constitutes a family farm. But there are going to be a lot of questions surrounding the family farm because basically, well, I'll explain why in the next slide. So
we have one other question, Robert.
Oh, what is that?
So if you have rental properties in a trust and the party dies, do the property taxes on all those rentals are reassessed to the current market value in a trust?
Most likely, if we're talking about the two exemptions that I'm talking about, the intergenerational or the portability, the answer is yes. Because first off, if assuming we're looking at just the standard living trust, the trust is the transfer occurs typically when the trust becomes quote unquote irrevocable, and that typically happens when somebody passes away. The trustee, who was the former trustor, passes away, and then a new successor trustee takes over. That is when the trust becomes quote irrevocable, and that's when the transfer takes place. So that is a transfer. Now, there are many other exemptions under the tax laws. So I'm only talking about two of them. Maybe it qualifies for some other exemption, maybe like husband, wife, maybe joint held as joint title, something. You know, these estate planning attorneys can do tricky things with partnerships and corporations, but just in terms of, you know, this narrow Prop 19, there's no exemption there. Okay. So so the question on this for the slide is, how much will the new taxable value be? So we're talking again about parent to child. And the general rule is when the assessed value is within $1 million of the original tax basis, then they simply transfer. Oh, did I change the slide there? So they simply transfer the value. That's the general rule. And that's going to be the most common occurrence. However, there is an exception, and the exception has to do with how much higher the value of the property is above the tax basis. So if the value of the property is more than $1 million above the current tax basis, then that tax basis is going to rise, even if it's being used as a principal residence. So in that case, the taxable value of the new property will be whatever the assessed value is minus $1 million. So I know that's a little confusing, and that's why I have this example. So let's go through the example. Assume the assessed value of the family home is $3 million, but the original taxable value is $500,000. So that's quite a gap. In fact, the assessed value is more than $1 million over the current taxable basis. So that tells you the taxable basis will rise. And the new taxable basis is going to be the $1 million, is going to be $1 million subtracted from the $3 million assessed value. The new taxable basis is therefore $2 million. So that seems like a convoluted way to go about arriving at the answer. And the reason I do that is because that's how the law reads. That's how you sort of figure it out using the law. But there's another way to think about this. And instead of doing all of those calculations, you can just say that you get $1 million off the current assessed value of the property, but the tax basis, of course, will never be lower than the original tax basis. And I have that here. I have that here at the bottom of it's not a bullet, but it's the bottom paragraph. sort of very easy, simple rule to understand. So I inherit a $10 million property. Even if I'm using it, I have to use it as my principal residence now. But even if I use it as my principal residence, I'm basically only going to get $1 million off the assessed tax basis. My tax basis is going to go up to $9 million. Okay. And again, I have this reference chart, which sort of just says everything that I've been talking about. Now, let's see if we have any questions that came up. So there was somebody was asking an intergenerational question, and I said I would get back to it when did I answer that question?
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering on investment property also, how that works.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, basically, this Prop 19 it's not going to apply to investment property now. I mean, before, well, it never applied to investment property to start with. It allowed, if it was the previous use of the property from the parent was as a principal residence, then it could be transferred and held as an investment property by the child. But you can't do that anymore. And on top of that, there was the $1 million exemption for all other real property. So if the parent had $1 million in investment property, that could be transferred, but that's gone too. I don't think I made that clear. So that $1 million for all other exemption, all other real property, that's gone as well, just gone. In its place, sort of in its place, is the family farm exemption. And yeah, so it's definitely, Prop 19 definitely represents a tax increase in terms of these types of questions. So basically, I'm not sure if Prop 19 is overall neutral, tax neutral or not. I mean, it's definitely giving people who are buying property more of a tax benefit than they got before, that's for sure. But it's so on one, it's giving on one hand and taking away on the other. So let's see, I have some questions here which come up. Well, actually, these are questions which are answered by the Chief Counsel of the Board of Equalization. And these pertain to the intergenerational transfer. So back in January, when people were trying to figure out what the heck does this law mean, there was all sorts of people coming up with various things, and the Chief Counsel for the Board of Equalization wrote an opinion letter. And so I've just selected just a couple questions from there. So first one, do all children have to use the property as a primary residence? So to get the benefit, you have to use it as a primary residence. What if there's 4 children? Do they all have to live in the same household? And the answer is, I hope they don't. That would seem ridiculous. And I think the Chief Counsel used the same basic reasoning, the ridiculous test, and arrived at the answer that only one transferee needs to maintain the family home as his or her principal residence. I know that there's nothing in this law that makes you come to that conclusion. I just know that it's ridiculous to think otherwise, and I'm sure that's what this guy was thinking as well. It is a man who is the Chief Counsel. Okay, so does the property lose the favorable tax treatment if the grandchild stops using the property as a family home? This is a big question. The question is like, how long do I have to live in this property as my principal residence before I can just go somewhere else? And the answer is forever. You have to live in that property forever. Otherwise, you lose the exclusion. So the Chief Counsel says it this way: the exclusion applies only as long as the transferee or another transferee maintains the property as his or her family home. And that's almost certainly going to be the answer. When he says another transferee, the idea there is one child lives in the property as the principal residence, but then moves out, but then that person's sibling will move in, so that's sort of the idea, I think. And the actual date of transfer, what's this last one? I'm not going to bother with this, but anyway, those are speculative answers, but they're almost certainly going to be the case. The implementing legislation doesn't say anything contrary. No one's arguing about those points. So those are very, very likely to be the answers. Okay. So here's a Chief Counsel is also weighing in on the family farm thing. What is a family farm? And it's just straight from the Prop 19. It gives us a definition right in the law. Real property which is under cultivation or which is being used for pasture or grazing, or that is used to produce any agricultural commodity. So it's a fairly broad definition there. And does a family farm have to be used as a primary residence? And the answer is no. There's nothing in this law that requires you to live on your family farm. What makes it a family farm is that it's a farm and that's being passed down from parent to child. And let's see, what else do we have here? And I have this question about trust because trust usually comes up. Can the transferor of a primary residence be the trustee of a trust? The answer is yes. And basically the trust doesn't really take away or add anything to the sale. If I'm selling my principal residence and moving to a new property, it doesn't matter that I have the property in a trust. And that's the same thing here. Okay, and I've put a lot of these answers I'm giving are speculative, but I've sort of pointed out that they're getting less and less so, frankly. And ultimately, though, we will see, I guess, looking like September, when this legislation will finally be signed, and a lot of these questions will be answered definitively. I can take away these asterisks if I ever have to do this presentation in September. We have resources that you can use if as part of marketing. You can spread the word about Prop 19, and if you go to this website, we have various marketing resources. We have flyers, we have Q&As, we have things which can be used on social media. And you're not going to get in trouble for using them because we gave them to you basically, and and they're sort of plastered with disclaimers, and there's nothing that in there that which so you can rely on them. Okay, so let's see.
Robert?
What are the other questions? Yes.
Oh, Robert, we have one other question in the question and answer from Sandy Moran.
Okay.
She wants to know if a person sells their home and replaces it with a new construction, is it the cost on construction or appraised value that is used? Is this type of transfer affected at all if the home that is sold is held in a family trust?
Yeah, I mean, this law allows you to, Prop 19 allows you to sell your property and purchase a replacement primary residence, purchase or construct a replacement primary residence. So it's right in there. And I would assume it's going to be the value, the market value of the property, not merely the cost of construction. It's going to be whatever the appraised value is.
Yeah, that's actually my situation. We lost our house to a fire. We rebuilt a property, and it'll be assessed again. And we put in an application, so that's how that's working.
Okay.
Also, we had a request to put back the resource slide that you had.
Oh, I'm sorry, the resource slide. Okay, I should go back to the resource.
Yeah,
slide?
she wanted to see that a little bit more.
This one? No.
Just the one that had the first web address, the Cal Prop 19.
Oh, there. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. So like I said, this new construction stuff is actually pretty tricky, and I have some information on it. There's like I said, there's 3, 4 or 5 different laws which pertain to new construction. I can send that to you. I'll send you the PowerPoint, and I'll send you this other thing I have.
Okay, I'll make sure and get it out to you. Any other questions out there?
Robert, we do have one other question in the question and answer from Jenny Crawford. She wants to know if Prop 19 only applies to replacing principal residence in California, not out of state purchase.
You mean you would sell a property in a different state and then move to California, or vice versa? I don't think it does. I'm not 100% sure there, but I haven't heard anything like that. I mean, I think it has to be, you have to sell and purchase within California.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's what I understand also.
Yeah. And
Any other questions out there? Robert, do you have any final remarks or anything you want to say?
my final remarks.
If you're ready for that.
Well, no, not really. I mean, the thing is, I think Prop 19 is really, there's a lot of controversy over Prop 19 with the tax raises, but the thing is that the association as a whole pushed for this, and the reason is, I think, sort of obvious, which is it benefits everyone across the state, but it's also very good for promoting the sale of houses. It allows somebody who is thinking about selling their house, it sort of gives them an extra advantage for doing so. And I think on the whole, it's good for sales. They tried to get Prop 19 passed previously. I can't remember what it was. Was it Prop 10? Do you remember?
I don't remember.
But it,
yeah. The one that was like a couple years before this.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it failed.
Remember.
But it failed. It failed.
It didn't have the support of the fire department or teachers.
Exactly. It didn't have the support of the firefighters. It didn't have the support of the cities and counties, which were very, very big. So that's why Prop 19 passed this time, basically, because it wasn't the preferred solution, but it was a compromise. It was a compromise that worked. I guess that's my final remark.
There. Well, thank you for that. Wonderful. Well, if nobody has any other questions, we can wrap this one up, but I want to let you know that I was speaking with Farrah Wilder earlier today. Our next presentation is going to be on June 29th with Farrah Wilder. She's going to be talking about fair housing. So I'm talking about some really interesting things about the laws in the past, and she's just very enthusiastic, and it's a great presentation. So I hope you guys will all sign up for that. We'll get some information out about that very soon. With that, thank you so much for attending the second of the Region 2 Education Co-op programs.